Ah, the magical world of Disney. So much goes on off stage and behind the scenes to ensure that the guests have the most magical time of their lives once they arrive on the property. Ever seen a webpage sign while walking through the parks? How about a maintenance cast member with a bag of tools? Anyone with a construction hard hat? Of course you haven't. That would ruin the experience that Walt Disney World is perfection. It's because that 99.9% of all the work goes on after the show is over. All the little mice that keep the place running like clockwork don't even start working until the announcement is made over the radios that we carry that the park is now clear. Then the crews get to work. Maintenance starts buzzing around on their golf carts. The custodial cast members bring out the large hose to wash down every inch of the streets we all walk on. And the construction crews are allowed to pass the security perimeter gates and come in and do whatever needs to be done. That's where my story begins. I've worked construction most of my life. When work dried up north, I moved to Florida, where some of my family had moved over the 10 years ago. Naturally, I needed to find a job. I wound up applying for and getting hired for a construction company that shall remain anonymous, that literally did almost all the construction needs for the corporate mouse. I spent 5 to 6 overnights a week at various locations at the Walt Disney World. With co-workers, we weren't employed by Disney, hence we are not cast members, doing whatever our foreman told us what needed to be done. Sweet gig, actually. Even though it was hard work at times, just think, how many people could truly say the get to ride around the Magic Kingdom, Animal Kingdom, etc. in the dead end of night in trucks, golf carts, and what have you, while the park is just about empty except for a skeleton crew. For about the first 6 months, I kind of kept to myself, except for talking with the crew of the company that I worked for. Then I began noticing how chummy many of the Disney overnight crew was with our staff. Custodians, when working in the same areas as us, would come and talk into the boys as well as the overnight security cast members. I began to slowly get to know many of these folks as well. They, are the most part, were really nice. I got to know many of the night security staff, by face at least, at all 4 parks as well as the resorts. If you don't know, Walt Disney World opened in 1971. That was exactly not too uncommon to come across someone who has been a lifer with Disney or knew someone who was. 40 plus years working for the mouse. God bless them. Even my foreman, who although did not work directly for Walt Disney World Resort, was one of these. Boy, did they have some stories to tell the past time. As I adjusted more to the job, I began to get more comfortable with the surroundings. The cast members' crew more social towards me, and I was able to make my way through the parks without getting lost too. Let me tell you, that is not an easy feat when you first start out working there, especially at night. Although it is not pitch black, there is very minimal lighting except for where we put our floodlights up to do work. Security is only using flashlights or the headlight of their carts to light their ways, and the store lights are only on if someone is working in them. Quite eerie and yet cool at the same time. It is like a totally different place than during operating hours. As a matter of fact, one time when I decided to visit the park as a guest, I couldn't find a ride that I wanted to go on because it looked so different during the day with all the colors, people, sounds, and music. 1 year of working at the place full time, and I had to swallow my stupid pride and go get a map. Pathetic. Anyways, as I started conversing more and more with the cast members, some of the security staff and I found out that we had a mutual interest in the paranormal. Of course, that would come up in conversations eventually when working graveyard shifts. I would get to hear stories from them all the time. The famous ghosts in the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, the murder/suicide in one of the rooms of a certain resort, the jumping off the terrace at another, ghosts of cast members who passed on that came back to say hi, the spooky occurrences at rides where some fortunate guest was killed. The stories went on and on. Although fun to hear, I won't lie, it did give me a whole property of ominous feel at times that a guest will never get to experience. Even co-workers of mine had stories to tell, attractions turning on even though the lockout-tagout system is in place to ensure that they don't, following someone to a break room and walking in to find no one in there. Of course, the noises and voices when they were working all alone. Ghost hunters, jackpot. So several months ago, when arriving at work, the foreman called our team over for a meeting. He announced that we would be starting a new segment in the Magic Kingdom shortly. We would be working on the Seven Dwarfs Mine train ride. This attraction would be opening later in the year. How exciting! Up until now, my crew, since I started with them, had been doing mundane yet necessary assessments. We had the pleasure of pouring concrete, digging ditches, fixing bathrooms, good stuff. Now, we were actually going to get to work on an attraction. Imagine me getting to tell my future wife and children that I helped make this as we were riding it. They would be in awe and so proud. The building was already up for the most part, and we were going to be working and making it show ready. You know, making a building look like a mine inside and out, fabricating rocks, fixating jewels, the works. When the time came to start this, he had us to meet one of the cast member break rooms inside the attraction. For those who don't know, most of all attractions have break rooms inside of them that the public can't see. A cast member working the ride literally doesn't have to leave it if he or she doesn't want to, even for a lunch break. He explained the job, who would be doing what each week, and all the normal details. He proceeded to tell us that as a per Disney management, we will all take our lunch breaks at 3 o'clock a.m. and only take it in this particular break room we were in. I thought this was kind of weird, since my employment with them began, we were never told when and where to take lunch. We always stagger our breaks as well, so most of the crew was always working. Whatever, I guess. The mouse paid our bills, and who the hell was I to question it? I was still the rookie, but I will say this. I saw what I was thinking in the eyes of my coworkers as well. We were only a group of 10 guys on this assignment, and we have broken up into groups of 5. One group will work on the outside and one group on the inside of the attraction. I was in the inside group. It was a pain to work in that thing. Due to the size of spaces we had to work, maybe 1 or 2 floodlights would fit in that area where we were working. It gave an effect of staring into a fire in the woods. While working on the wall, it was bright as hell. When you came out of that space, you were as blind as a bat. The first few days, it became a running joke/contest of who would trip on something or broke their ass the most in each week. Had to pay for the drinks when we went out together. I paid up twice the first month. Thanks, Disney. I guess you could call me paranoid, but I would never leave my lunch bag in the fridge in the break room. I'm an absolute angry asshole if I get hungry. And after having it stolen once while at the Animal Kingdom, I was not going to have it happen again. So I just carried it with my other gear from then on. We were working on the opposite side of the attraction from the break room, and it was just about lunchtime. We cleaned up all the possible trip hazards and ran on break. When we got into the break room, I realized I had left my bag where we were working. Damn it. There was no way I was spending $8 on a Coke and a stupid beer claw from one of the Disney rip-off vending machines. I told the guys that I was going to run back to get my bag, so off I went. I was hurrying along because we were only get half an hour of lunch, and if we take even a minute longer to get back to our work location, there is hell to pay. And you all know how fast a half hour flies unless you're working. Trying to make good time, I must have made a wrong turn in all blackness. My stupid flashlight was in my tool bag. Of course, I was attempting to feel my way around the track when I saw some light coming up ahead of me. They looked like they could be a set of emergency lights, but they were quite dim and flickering. Who cares? Any port in a storm, right? I slowly made my way towards them and began to hear voices, but I couldn't make out any words. There was no one in the attraction other than us, or so we were told. Oh my god. After all the stories I was told, was I finally going to have one of my own? As much as it felt the hairs of my neck to stand up, I was excited as well. Even though I really like hearing about ghosts, I can't say that I'm really, truly afraid of them. I just don't want them in my home. Other than that, I find the idea of them fascinating. I slowly peeked my head around the next corner. I wish to God it was a ghost I saw. It was a large, at least compared to where we were working, open space. And there was a fabricated stone slab made to look like a natural lock formation in the center. 6 figures in suits were around in the circle. 5 were holding candles, while 1 was reading off of what it looked like an old piece of parchment. What he was saying was beyond my knowledge, not English from what I could hear. Every time the main suit would finish a sentence or two, the others would repeat the last word. As I crouched there, amazed, I saw what looked like a flash of yellow and blue stirring from the top of the altar. There was someone on it. A woman. She stirred again, and I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. It looked like one of those college program kids that said to go be friends with the characters, completely dressed as Snow White. She was gagged and bound. What the hell was I seeing? Her eyes were huge and filled with fright. Tears were streaming down her face, making her overly done makeup run. As much as she struggled, she could barely move. The man with the parchment stopped reading. The others all proceeded. Some crudely made daggers made their way to her. 2 of them went to each of her arms, 2 to her legs, and 1 stood on top of her head. The leader, for lack of a better word, made a gesture with his hands and said one more comprehensible word, and all the others moved in. The 2 by her arms sliced her arms from the mid-bicep down to the wrist. The others did the same from the mid-thigh to the tops of her feet. The 5th one actually carved from what looked like a half-moon into her forehead. I stifled a scream and closed my eyes. I could hear muffled screams and smell of copper in my nostrils, and the taste in the back of my throat. I opened my eyes briefly to see the leader proceed a knife, walk over to the altar, and lift poor Snow White's chin up toward him. That's when I turned and ran. I got back to the break room, sprinting through the door. I must have looked like a crazed, because one of my buddies said, "What the hell happened to you? And where's your lunch bag?" I didn't even answer him. I just stood there. He looked at me over one time and decided to call the foreman over on radio to come talk to me. The foreman came in, took one look at me and asked if I was feeling okay. I shook my head. He told me to go home for the remainder of my shift. I called out sick the next 3 days in the comfort of my home. I attempted to rationalize of what happened. It had to be a gag, right? Wasn't my boys with an elaborate welcome to the crew trick? I mean, God, Walt Disney World is crammed full of college program kids. Late teens and early 20-year-olds away from home and college, getting paid crap just so they could put Disney in their resumes. Just fornicating and causing havoc every chance they get. Playing tricks so they could put it on their blogs or Twitter or whatever else stupid things they use to get attention. Had to be. On my first night back to work, I literally had to force myself not to turn my car around at the security gate when the guard opened it for me to enter. When I got into the break room, one of the lifters I worked with was sitting there seemingly waiting for me. He told me to clock in, leave my stuff with him, and go meet with the foreman over by the main entrance. I looked at him quizzically, since it was pretty far from where the mine was, and it was heavily frowned upon for us non-cast members to be found wandering far from where we were assigned. I stated as such, and he just said, "Go. You'll be with your boss, so it'll be in his ass, not yours if someone says something." I made my way over to the main entrance and find him under the train station, sitting in one of the benches. He told me to sit. We sat there for about 5 minutes without speaking. He lit up a cigarette, and I did as well. During the night shift, you could get away with this if you were careful about it. He asked me about what happened to me the other night. I just shrugged, looked at the newly hosed down ground, and exhaled. He put his hand on my shoulder and said that I was a great coworker. The other guys really liked me a lot, and he didn't want to lose me. And that he was just surprised I came back after the way I looked. I told him that was far from the truth. He asked me if I was just sick, or if something had happened. He also asked me if maybe a cast member manager had been giving me a hard time, and if so, he'd handle it. I shook my head and said that he wouldn't believe me and would probably fire me for being a nut if I told him. He then said something that made me feel like it was okay to tell my story. He said, "I have worked here since it was just flat land and dirt roads. Nothing you could say can shock me." I looked up at him, dead in the eyes. When I saw that he was telling the truth, I began to explain everything from the beginning. I ended the story with the other guy told me to come and see him. My foreman sat there, flicked his cigarette butt, and ground it into the floor. A huge Disney no-no. He had sat there nodding through the entire story, not interrupting me once, never once smirked, a smile, a look of disbelief. A custodial truck happened to drive by when the headlights flashed on us. I had seen that all the blood had seemed to drain from my foreman's face. He breathed in and exhaled once, from the mouth. He had the beginnings of tears in his eyes. He finally spoke. "What I'm about to tell you, kiddo, not many people here have been long enough to know, and those who do know almost never speak about it. It's sort of a taboo subject, and the few that do talk about it are just too old to care, or have had one too many scotches." He smiled half-heartedly at this, and I thought maybe he might stop. But he continued. "I have lived in this area for almost 80 years. I've barely been out of this state less time than I could count on one hand. Orlando has only looked this way for a short time. If you could have seen this land in the time I grew up here, you would be amazed. Marshland and orange groves, nothing else. Until Uncle Walt decided that this was the spot for his next incredible theme park. There was practically nothing. Humans have been inhabiting this land for a very long time. The Ace, the Apalachee, the Calusa, the Timucua, the Tocobaco, all native Indians that lived in or around the area you are sitting on right now. The Paralel Indians were here before them. Ancient lands. Well, I'm no historian, but I guess them Indians at some point figured out this land was a little spoiled. Spoiled as in not just bad, but spoiled as in how a little child throws a tantrum if it doesn't get its way. At some point when these cultures were not having good weather or crops, what have you, They figured out that a blood sacrifice could do the trick. Every time they built a large structure in this area, they drew blood. But for whatever reason, the sacrifice had to do with the structure being built. For example, if the Indians were building a religious structure, a shaman had to be sacrificed. If a shelter was building a barn or an orange grove, a farmhand had to be the one. You get me? And it had to be done by the elders of the town. Couldn't be done by just anyone, but by the elders and most influential ones in the area. You ever seen that movie Pet Sematary by Stephen King? It's like that, but the important people involved. Do you know that the story about Disney buying this land? He bought it not under the Disney brand, but hundreds of pseudo companies. He didn't want anyone to know what he was going to build a theme park here, because the locals may not have sold it as cheaply as they did. So he did what he did. I wonder if all through this half-truth bargaining, if him or his roundtable executives ever wondered why so many were willing to sell at that price. Would they done having to do with the despicable to make a profit here? Did many of them want out? It can really make you wonder. And how come supposedly nobody dies at Disney? How come all people were proclaimed dead off the property? And why do we hear so many college kids that were supposedly running rampant here? Think about it. I just gotta tell you because I think you may have deserved it after you've seen what you claim to. The powers at be here are powerful. More powerful than just being Disney executives. They pretty much rule everything. You think Club 33 is exclusive? The club you stumbled upon rules more than just a theme park. If you talk about what you've seen, your life may be in danger. I just sat there, trying to soak in from what I just heard. This was insane. And then my foreman said one more thing before the last sentence I ever said to that nice man. If you think that was bad, just imagine what I heard when we were building It's a Small World. I swear I still hear those screams of those poor kids once I close my eyes at night. 40 years after. My reply? I quit. The magical world of Disney. I still get the shakes when I think about it. I hate every fucking Disney commercial that comes on TV. And they come on a lot. I get goosebumps every time. I see that Universal is hiring, and I need work. Should I apply?